Bethesda seem to have got themselves in a bit of a pickle with their game releases. So let's talk about that now. If we go all the way back to the Skyrim release and the Fallout 4 release, Bethesda almost immediately jumped on board the Elder Scrolls Online bandwagon and then the Fallout 76 bandwagon, and they stayed on that wagon for quite some time, a lot longer than they intended if you go by what Todd Howard had to say in his recent interview. But why did they stay on that bandwagon so long, and why has it caused so many problems with their other games? Well, let's look at that, shall we? First, we have the Elder Scrolls Online and their microtransactions with DLCs like pets and mounts and weapons and armour. These make millions for the company every single day. Well, every day, every year. So they have no incentive to make a new game whilst these little macrotransactions are doing their thing, because they're earning their money. They're making their company worth more. The same with Fallout 76. These macrotransactions, when they sell stupid little things to players, pay for quite a lot of stuff. In the case of Fortnite, Epic fund their whole game store using the profits from Fortnite and the Unreal Engine. So they can use that to pay for games to be hosted on their platform. So it's a big money spinner. It's also a really good way of saying to people that you're a past-it company with no future products worth note, because all you're doing is you're cashing in on a name you built up. Because that's what they're doing. They're cashing in on their Elder Scrolls brand and their Fallout brand and not producing anything that says to anybody that they're still capable of making those kind of games. Then we have Starfield release dates put back because they're not quite ready. Which is a good thing, right? Because Bethesda are called Bugfesta for a reason. I call it Bugzilla. Bugfesta for a reason. Right, so if Microsoft said, no, you're not doing that under our brand, you're going to get it right, so we're going to give you an extra few months to fix everything. The trouble is, Bethesda misses all these bugs even with their testers. Now, I've done beta testing for companies before, and I've worked on as part of development teams before, and I can tell you now that some of the worst teams don't listen to their testers. The testers report bugs over and over and over again, and they go from one patch to another, and you're expected to test it, and they've never made any attempt to fix it. It's only when the testers actually get, voice time with the developer doing the fixing that things actually seem to get done. At least that was the case with some of the companies I worked for. Oh, not worked for, but worked with. Right, so if Microsoft are going to do any testing, they need to be in the same chat room as their testers so their programmers can speak directly to the people who are in the front line of testing. That's the only way it would get anywhere. Will they do that? That will probably cause too many leaks, because it means giving them an early version of the game, and that means leaks are going to happen. So probably not. They'll be more secretive, if anything, and try and keep it in-house so the bugs won't get fixed. We will still have Bugfesta games released. Anyhow, it says, so Starfield is really doomed to suffer from the same kind of issues as every other Bethesda game ever has. It's not going to be able to avoid it because of their need for secrecy. They need to keep a lid on how the information is disseminated around the world. Now, if you look back to 2021, when Todd Howard said Fallout 5 was in the early stages of production, he actually said they've got a single sheet of paper on it. That's what they said. So he had a single sheet of paper of ideas for Fallout 5. That's what he called early production. And he said it would be released after the next Elder Scrolls game, which isn't going to be even made until after Starfield. So you see, they've got themselves in a bit of a pickle there, because they announced Fallout 5 early and then said it's going to be released last. Then mentioned the Elder Scrolls would be out in 2022. This was when they stopped making things and moved on to Elder Scrolls Online. Well, 2022 is about to finish. Right, so, they didn't mention 2022, it said several years, and it equated to 2022 at the time. So that deadline's come and gone. That's what Todd Howard means by we wouldn't have waited this long if he had a choice. But anyway, I probably misquoted him there, but you get the idea. Anyway, it says the point is, the games they've announced aren't even in production yet. They're basically saying that we are going to make these games, we just don't know when. We are going to make Fallout 5, we don't know when. We are going to make the Elder Scrolls 6, we don't know when. Here's a bit of a teaser. And it's the only teaser you're going to get because there's nothing else to show. In the meantime, it's been probably a decade now, or getting on for a decade, since they've made any decent single-player games. In that 10 years, you have to ask, how many staff have come and gone that made them games special, that brought their experiences into Bethesda and made them games worth playing, are still there? Because many of them might have moved on. I mean, they've hired a load of modders, and they're using these modders to make stupid armour things, thinking that'll be good enough for players. But we can get that on the modding scene. We do not need Bethesda to supply that kind of context. We can get that. Quest mods and things like that are much harder to make. I make them, I know. I mean, getting more of that type of thing from Bethesda might be more in line, because in the quest mods you get the armour, you get the sword, you get everything. You don't just get a little bit of a mod, you get the whole package with everything that goes in it. And Bethesda tend to do a good job on them, so that's what people want. But the modders that have been doing that kind of thing, right, are taken from the community, and I think they must be getting paid by mod, or per mod, because quite frankly, they're releasing these quick and easy mods to make. So it's in order to rake up the money, so they're very similar to each other. Like 100 different ways of colouring your Pip-Boy. Things like that, or armour or weapon mods. Very few of them actually have some substance. And if they did have some substance, the amount of work you put in versus what you get back in payment is pitiful. I mean, I saw how much they were offering modders, and it wasn't as much as you would expect. It certainly wasn't enough to inspire me to make mods for them. So anyway, you've got Fallout announced, but not in production. You've got Skyrim announced, but not really in production. I mean, they say it is, but they're working on 3 games at once. It seems unlikely to me. So until I see something substantial from them, like a gameplay video, I'm listing it as not in production, because quite frankly, we don't know when real production starts, because all they're really doing right now is sitting around a table writing ideas down and making musical scores and videos about the terrain they want to be in. So they might have generated the world, but it'd be empty at this point. There'd be nothing in it. So I mean, the chances are the landscape we saw in the early game would be a bit like Kvatch. You know, the demo for Kvatch, what they showed at, I think it was GameCon or something like that. So whereas it looked like a burning city and everybody was in awe about it, and then you get to actually play Kvatch and you realise all the buildings are tiny compared to the rest of the world. The scale wasn't right. I know that. I made 2 Kvatch mods, remember, so I know the scale wasn't right. So much changed between the making of that video, the making of the Skyrim Hammerfall video, you see where I'm going here, and the actual game releases. I mean, the chances are that Skyrim Hammerfall video will have nothing whatsoever to do with the actual finished game. I mean, the chances are that terrain is either early work or just made for that video. But Todd Howard did say that he was making music. They make the music early now, and they do the voice acting as they go, which is what I do. It's the best way to work. Trouble is, if someone leaves or dies, right, then you've got to record all the lines or change your story to write a character out of the plot and then introduce a new one. So it does have its downfalls, but still. But anyhow, everything hinges on the release of Starfield, because Fallout isn't being released till the Elder Scrolls is, and the Elder Scrolls won't be released until after Starfield. And none of the former 2, you know, Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, are actually in full production yet. So it all boils down to Starfield. And here we go again with the delays. See, Bethesda said, or Todd Howard said, that people play his games or their games for decades, and their future games are going to be made with that in mind. So are they going to commit time and effort to keep developing every single game? Or is there going to be a cut-off point? I mean, if you take Starfield, are they going to keep releasing patches and updates and new features for it? And if they do, who's doing it? Is it going to be the Elder Scrolls team doing it? Is it going to be the Fallout team doing it? Is it going to be the Starfield team doing it? Or is it more likely that they're all the same people? And committing resources to one game means taking it away from another, which means delaying the release of the next game. So as I said, Bethesda have got themselves in quite a pickle. And the more you look at it, the more you understand how all these things are going to delay, you realise that until they actually get something out the door and can move on, it's not really going to improve. It's going to be the same story. We could be waiting a long time before we even see Fallout. Which is why I think the chances are Obsidian getting the crack at making the next Fallout game is much more likely than Bethesda making it, simply because Bethesda have already got their hands full. And Obsidian, whilst they've got a few games in the works, just like Oblivion have, not Oblivion, Bethesda have, then they'll be in better position to get one out round about the same time as the next Elder Scrolls game, I would say. But that's me guessing. But as you can see, the way things are working out with Bethesda now, they've delayed because of multiplayer games for far too long. Now the market's dropping off for them because people simply have stopped playing them, especially in the current climate with inflation and energy prices, and this hard sell they keep doing with these multiplayer games. They're having to make their money, from these DLCs. And the DLCs, people aren't buying them as often as they used to. I mean, yeah, they're still making millions, but the market's slowly drying up. And the longer they kept that going, the more likely it was people would start seeing the developer as a has-been developer just producing stuff on old successes and then not really making anything new. We all fall for that. Even I've fallen for that a little bit. I plan to do stuff in the future. I'm just waiting for something decent to make it for. I mean, my gaming days, where I was playing anything, have long since gone because the games they make today tend to be console games. And they remind me too much of 1980s games because the way they're designed to work, with save points and you've got to get to the end of a level. I stopped playing that kind of game a long time ago. Auto-aim, I didn't like that in the 90s. I'm certainly not going to play it now. And console controls, no, I'm a PC user, not a console user. So you see, there's an awful lot of reasons for me staying away from those games and not many reasons for me diving into them. Admittedly, I'm making myself a bit of a dinosaur that way, but I mean, I don't really get the chance to, enjoy games when I'm having to do things I really got bored to death of doing decades ago. So I look forward to PC games, look forward to games that support the PC properly, which narrows what I play to just a few titles and a few developers, and usually strategies and sims and things like that. Bethesda are quite an important part of all of that. They're the ones that make the games I enjoy the most. But they've left it a long time. A long time. And I have to ask myself, can they still make the games? Have they still got the capability of churning out classics like Oblivion and Morrowind and Skyrim? We'll just have to find out, won't we? See you in the next one.